Nearly 4,000 years ago, a king of Babylon carved his laws onto a black stone pillar taller than a man and set it up for everyone to see. It is one of the oldest written law codes on earth. King Hammurabi claimed the sun god himself handed down these laws, and they were brutally simple. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, taken completely literally. If a builder's house collapsed and killed the owner, the builder was put to death. But if it killed the owner's son, then the builder's own son was killed instead. If a surgeon operated and his patient died, the law said his hand should be cut off. It was the world's first malpractice penalty, written in flesh. And when the truth was unclear, they let the river decide. The accused was thrown into the water. If they sank and drowned, they were guilty. If they floated free, they were innocent. This is the ancient world's justice, and it was far harsher and far stranger than anything we know today. In the Greek city of Athens, a lawmaker named Draco wrote the first code. His penalty for almost every crime, from murder down to stealing a single cabbage, was exactly the same: death. When people asked Draco why such small crimes deserved death, he reportedly said the smallest ones already did, and he had nothing worse to give the greater ones. His laws were so hated that we still call cruel rules draconian today. A generation later, almost all of them were thrown out. But the Athenians kept one clever weapon. Once a year, they could vote to exile any man they thought too dangerous, for 10 full years, with no trial at all. Each citizen scratched a name onto a broken piece of pottery, called an ostrakon. If 6,000 shards named the same man, he was gone. This is where our word ostracize comes from. Then came Rome, and Rome turned punishment into a public art form. Rome's earliest laws, the 12 tables, were carved in bronze in the Forum. One rule allowed a group of creditors to literally cut a hopeless debtor's body into pieces, each taking a share. A Roman magistrate walked the streets, flanked by guards called lictors. Each carried a bundle of rods wrapped around an axe, a walking symbol of the power to flog you or behead you. For the crime of murdering your own father, Rome invented a punishment of pure nightmare. It was called the punishment of the sack. The killer was sewn into a large leather sack, but not alone. In with them went a dog, a rooster, a snake, and a monkey. The whole sack was then thrown into the river to drown. Rome's holiest women were the Vestal Virgins, priestesses who guarded the sacred flame of the city and swore an oath of purity for 30 years. If a Vestal broke that vow, she could not simply be executed, because spilling her sacred blood was forbidden. So instead, she was sealed alive inside an underground chamber with a lamp and a little food, and left there. And if a Vestal let the eternal flame go out, she was stripped and beaten by the high priest himself in the dark. For enemies of Rome, the punishment was crucifixion, a slow and public death, designed above all to terrify anyone watching. When the slave army of Spartacus was finally crushed, 6,000 survivors were crucified along a single road leading into Rome, one cross every few steps, for over 100 miles. If a Roman army unit showed cowardice, the general could order decimation. The soldiers drew lots, and every 10th man was beaten to death by his own friends. And for entertainment, the condemned were thrown to wild beasts in the arena, torn apart by lions and bears while tens of thousands of Romans cheered. A packed Colosseum could watch dozens of criminals die in a single lunch break, between the morning fights and the afternoon games. But even Rome had rivals in cruelty. Far to the east, the Persian Empire had punishments that Greek writers could barely describe without horror. When a Persian king discovered that a royal judge had taken a bribe and given a false verdict, he had the judge skinned alive. Then he had the judge's skin stretched across the very chair where verdicts were given, and appointed the dead man's own son to sit on it and judge. A permanent warning against corruption. Greek writers also described a Persian torture so grim that historians still debate whether it was real. They called it the boats. According to the account, the victim was trapped between two boats, force-fed milk and honey, smeared in it, and left in the sun until the insects it attracted slowly consumed them alive. Whether it truly happened, no one can prove. In ancient China, the philosophy of the legalists held that only terror could keep order. So the punishments were designed to make people too afraid to break even the smallest rule. A thief might have his nose cut off, or a foot amputated, or his face permanently tattooed to mark his crime for life. And for the crime of treason, China used the most sweeping punishment of all, the extermination of 9 kindreds. Not just the traitor, but his parents, children, siblings, and cousins, all put to death together. Back in Egypt, justice answered to a goddess named Ma'at, who stood for truth and cosmic order. An Egyptian who told a lie under oath could be sentenced to death. A tomb robber who disturbed a pharaoh could be impaled on a wooden stake. For lesser crimes, Egyptian judges ordered the cutting off of a hand, a nose, or the ears. A man caught smuggling might lose his nose and be exiled to the edge of the desert. The Spartans, meanwhile, trained cruelty into their children. Boys were deliberately underfed and encouraged to steal food, then whipped not for stealing, but for getting caught. Sparta even ran a secret police of young men called the Crypteia, who were permitted to roam the countryside at night and kill the strongest slaves, to keep the rest afraid. Why was all of this so savagely harsh? Because ancient rulers had no police force on every corner, and no prisons to hold thousands of people. Their only tool was fear. A punishment terrifying enough and public enough was meant to stop 1,000 crimes before they ever began. And yet, buried inside these brutal codes was something new, the radical idea that the law should be written down, the same for rich and poor, and known to all. Every courtroom in the world today is a distant descendant of that black stone pillar in Babylon. That was Chapter 5. Subscribe, and next time we sit down at the ancient table, for the wildest feasts and the strangest foods in history, I will see you there. Sparta even ran a secret police of young men called the Crypteia, who were permitted to roam the countryside at night and kill the strongest slaves, to keep the rest afraid. Why was all of this so savagely harsh? Because ancient rulers had no police force on every corner, and no prisons to hold thousands of people. Their only tool was fear. A punishment terrifying enough and public enough was meant to stop 1,000 crimes before they ever began. And yet, buried inside these brutal codes was something new, the radical idea that the law should be written down, the same for rich and poor, and known to all. Every courtroom in the world today is a distant descendant of that black stone pillar in Babylon. That was Chapter 5. Subscribe, and next time we sit down at the ancient table for the wildest feasts and the strangest foods in history, I will see you there.